on Albion counter gambit. d4, d5, c4, e5. Now, if some people terrified with Albion gambit, and they shouldn't be, then it sounds like a personal problem, and this kind of people, they would choose second move knight f3. Albion gambit is not a good way to play for black, and there are multiple ways to respond for white. Interestingly enough, after d takes c, d4, knight f3, knight c6, g3 is correctly known as the best move. Well, you don't want to go e3 because there is bishop b4 check and bishop d2. Black simply takes on e3, and they will have a very good position. They can take on f2, then they can take the queen, and they can take the bishop. And incorrect response for white gets them very bad position. Well, it's correctly known that g3 is the best option here. Of course, there's possibility of playing e4, and this is only for those people who think that e4 may give also advantage, and they will not be too far from the truth. e4 is very credible option as well. But we will go with the g3 as renowned as the best continuation. After g3, black has practically two moves: bishop g4, intending quick queen d7 and castling on the queen side, and bishop e6 for the same idea, attacking c4 meanwhile. Bishop e6 is not played very often, and what we should do on bishop e6, I am strongly against, in this position, playing knight d2. I'm also strongly against playing on bishop g4, knight d2. And those moves are known as the best moves. Well, but as you know, theory is created by following the games of strong players, and that's what they do the most. But when we have such a powerful computer engines that help us to maximize results of the openings, then we will not play like this. For example, let's try first bishop e6. On bishop e6, I want to go bishop g2. This will give white very serious advantage. Bishop takes c4. Now, what we are doing is we let black's bishop to make two moves to take on c4. Meanwhile, we castle, and you know bishop cannot stay for long on c4, and he's going to make third move. That's where we're going to gain serious advantage in development. If d3, e takes d, queen takes d3, well, bishop takes d3, rook e1, simply doesn't do anything good for black. Black has wasted too much time and has bad position. And queen takes d3 at least may help black to castle quick. On queen takes d3, bishop e3, and if black castles, then queen a4. This is already very difficult position for black, because white is intending to go knight c3, and they're going to have a huge advantage in development. And don't forget this bishop on g2 and queen on a4 may deliver some, crushing blows on a black's king. So after queen a4, bishop b5, queen g4 check, and on king b8, knight c3, white has very large advantage, and this is not something you want to play for black. And on queen d7, for example, we have two pleasant choices. We can take and force black to recapture with the king, because on rook takes d7, bishop h3. And after they recapture with the king, I don't think we should discuss the quality of this position for black. And on king b8, knight c3, this looks quite bad for black. So bishop e6, attack on c4 pawn is not really good for black. So what we did simply went bishop g2, and on bishop takes c4, just castle. This position is very bad for black. So let's go with the main move, which is bishop g4. And again, everybody automatically plays here knight d2. And if you see, huge majority of the games played with knight d2. I'm strongly against this knight d2, and I want to keep my knight on b1 for as long as I can to have an option to go with this b1 knight to a different square that may be a lot more productive. So I would recommend bishop g2, and on queen d7, simply castle. Actually, I got this idea way before computer era. I played the game in one international tournament, and I played like this, and when black castled, I decided to keep knight on b1. And it's interesting, when computers came by, I tested this system, and I came to conclusion that it's very, very powerful. So now what I do is I go simply queen a4. The idea behind not playing knight d2 is to go rook d1 quick. That's why we're holding knight on b1. Now, well, in this position, black played a6. Idea is to take on f3 and take on e5. Immediately taking on f3, of course, is not good because queen's simply going to take on a7. So black is preparing this threat by playing a6. Now we go rook d1. Well, bishop takes f3 is not something white should be afraid of, because we can take ef and the knight takes e5, queen b3. And this is not going to be very good for black. Not to mention that we can simply take on d7, and again, rook cannot recapture because of bishop h3. And any other way black recaptures, they're going to lose the d4 pawn. So in this position, my opponent played bishop h3, and this is one of the credible options. I went e6. This is tempo winning move. Actually, this bishop h3 can be played even a move earlier. The response would be exactly the same, e6. What e6 move does is forcing black to take on e6 with the bishop. That's the only way to recapture on e6. If pawn takes, black loses a piece, and if queen takes, they also lose a piece after knight g5. So bishop has to take, and now rook d1, a6. Now we got this position with a6, bishop h3, or bishop h3 and a6 with these two move orders. And now we go knight c3. That's what we've been holding all this time, knight on b1. And after knight c3, we want to go this knight with d5. Knight f6, bishop g5, and black is experiencing very serious problem. Bishop e7, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and knight d5. Now, this is already very, very difficult for black. White simply wants to go b4 and b5 and deliver the final blow to black's king. In my game, my opponent simply took a pawn, which is a losing option. Knight d4, queen a5, and knight takes c6 ends the game, because when queen takes, there is simply a mate, nothing short of a mate in two moves. Rook d7, bishop takes d7. So if this is a mate, actually white could have done the same thing by playing bishop h3 first, which wins the queen with next move knight takes c6 check. So there is no way black cannot take on d5. Then white wants to go b4. This is extremely difficult position. Any knight e5 will run into queen takes d7, followed by knight takes d4. There is no good option for black, and white has nearly winning position. Now, that's why I very strongly recommend not to play knight d2. It's like formula here. When they go bishop g4, immediately go knight d2. What knight d2 does, protects the knight on f3 that protects pawn on e5. And you don't play this opening simply hanging on the pawn on e5. You develop quickly. And when black gets pawn back, they will have a bad position. And actually, I have my own theory about black sacrificing pawn in the opening, in any opening. I have not seen pawn sacrifice for black that was any good ever in any opening. Well, if we want to put it in a primitive way, how can I explain it? Well, if I had to explain it very simple, here's what I would say. White starts the game with an extra tempo, so they likely to have a little advantage in development because they start first. When black gives a pawn quickly in very early stage, they are trying to catch up. Now, is the pawn in the opening worth catching up? And I have not seen any pawn sacrifice in early stage for black that would work the way they want, unless white makes mistakes. And this is the only way we can view it. Now, let's look at a couple of different options for black as well. So now, instead of going queen d7, suppose black goes knight e7. We castle, and now knight g6. This can be done also with bishop on c8. Now we can go queen a4, and on bishop c5, knight d2, and on castling, the reason we went knight d2, because we have a target on c5. We go now knight b3, and we get very simple and very easy to understand advantage. So we go knight b3, and on bishop e7 we go c5. We're attacking d4 pawn, and when black takes on e5, we take on e5, we take on d4, and after bishop takes c5, bishop e3. It's the easiest way to play for white. Now, black's pieces are scattering all over the board. Meanwhile, we have well-centralized knight on d4, two very well-placed bishops, and we're going to go next two moves. Rook fd1, rook ac1. white is clearly having good size advantage. Well, what can I add to these variations? After d takes e and knight c6, g3, black can play also immediately knight e7. There were a lot of games played with it, and mostly I don't think you can find any game played with this opening by a strong player. So it's always people that looking for easy way out of the opening, easy solution, and get good position, and possibly develop mating attack after bishop g4, bishop g2, queen d7, then exchange those bishops with bishop h3 and checkmate white's king. That doesn't work like this. It works like this in two cases only. One is in a sleep, and the other in the fairy tales that your opponent helps to construct. But if white plays correctly, castle, for example, and castling here is number one option. It's a first option for black to play bishop h3. We're gonna go e6. These tactical shots is helping us to gain a tempo, very valuable tempo, give up an extra pawn that we did not even expect to keep an extra pawn. Bishop takes e6, rook d1. Immediately, we're planning on knight c3 and knight d5. And after a6, now we go knight c3 and knight f6, bishop g5. Very straightforward play. To eliminate the knight on f6, go with the knight on d5 and open light square bishop, and possibly go b4, b5. Black's position is very difficult, mildly put. I don't think this should ever be on the list of the openings in yours or anybody else's repertoire for black. Black simply has a bad position, and, well, actually lately, if we take in consideration last 7-8 years, I don't know if anyone ever plays Albion counter gambit. I think it's completely out of order. And why? We just saw the simple way for white to get an advantage. Of course, there are multiple different ways. Knight d2, that one was recommended by theory as the best continuation, it's still good. I don't think it's the best. It's close to the best, maybe in a top 3, but it's a very good option, and as well as several other options for white here. So, for example, bishop g2 and bishop f4, also an option. But we cannot have too many weapons against Albion counter gambit, and one I showed you now should work just fine, and it should never fail. If you play it correctly, and correctly meaning just follow the basic principles of the opening. Thank you very much, and I hope you get yourself good weapon against Albion counter.